Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, October the 8th, 2020, at approximately 7:05 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams?
Present, sorry, muted.
Kretschmer?
Is it Kretschmer?
Yep. Graziano?
I'm here.
Jasper? Dudek? O'Laughlin? Walrath?
Here.
Corey?
Here, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. So for the record, everyone, one of the things that I just want to remind everyone of is that due to COVID, we're still operating in this hybrid model. And so we have several of us that are assembled here in Village Hall along with the petitioner. And we have several of our members who are joining us via the Zoom application. And so I just want to be public and transparent about that. And before we begin, I want to make sure that the petitioner is aware that your application tonight, Mr. Maury, is something we call ZPA final. And what that requires is...
Final.
I'm sorry?
It's Village Board final.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
So that's a different subject then. Okay, I thought it was ZPA final here. I thought that's what we discussed earlier in the week, Brian. So in that case, your application still requires for a variance 4 positive votes. And then it would go before the village elected officials, and they would be the final arbiters of our discussion tonight. So I just want to make you aware of that. We do have some members that are absent. And just to further complicate things, Mr. Maury, one of our newest members who's on the call with us tonight, the Zoom call, is able to participate in the proceedings, but he's not able to vote on the actual application by state law because he's our 8th associate member. So before we move forward, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that reality.
I'll put my trust in you. In expedience, let's just move ahead.
Okay. So before we begin with your application, there is one piece of administrative business that I need to conduct, and then we'll come back to the process in just a moment, okay? So gentlemen that are here, that's Mr. Graziano, and along with those of you that are joining us via Zoom, I'm hopeful that you have your packets, and you would have received in your packets the meeting minutes dated September the 10th, 2020. This was for 209 Mildred. It was the Crane application. So I just want to confirm that A, everyone has their packages and they've reviewed the meeting minutes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so thank you very much, gentlemen. So the chair, via general consent.
I have a comment to make.
Oh, please,
Just
go ahead, Mr. Graziano.
in regard to the minutes, where it says discussion none, it kind of doesn't set real well. It's like we didn't even discuss what was going on, we just voted for it. Just,
We can make sure.
maybe a word or two,
Sure.
discussion ensued or something. Discussion
I'm
none
certain of that,
doesn't-
Mr. Graziano, that there were questions asked.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a very good catch, so thank you very much.
Yep, we can make sure we elaborate on that more.
So thank you very much, Mr. Graziano. Always have your eye on the ball. Thank you.
I don't always hit it, though.
You usually do. Well, good evening, Mr. O'Laughlin.
Good evening. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, we understand.
It was either pull over and try to dial in or make it here at 7:01.
That's okay. So we'll show you present now. And where we are in the process, Mr. O'Laughlin, is that we were just explaining that we have some of our members that are joining us via the Zoom application. And this actually, we now have more members to vote on your application, Mr. Maury. So I'll come back to where I began. And for Mr. O'Laughlin, we're just reviewing the meeting minutes dated September the 10th, 2020. And so by general consent, those in favor of approving the meeting minutes with the request of Mr. Graziano, please say aye.
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 Thank you, gentlemen. Any opposed? All right, so we're going to move on to our next case. And just so you know, Mr. Murray, the way we've traditionally done this is that Mr. Simmons will give us an overview of your request, and then some of us may have questions for Mr. Simmons. And then if you want to, you're welcome to add any color or comment to your application once Mr. Simmons concludes. Then we open it up to the public. You can see there's no one besides yourself assembled here in Village Hall. It's possible some people that are residents have joined us via the Zoom application. If that is the case, I'll double check with Mr. Simmons when we get to the public comment and to see if anybody wants to comment further. Once we close that portion of the meeting, we discuss the case further amongst ourselves. We take a vote, and then that vote gets delivered back to our elected officials. And as I described before, your application, because it is a variance, does require 4 positive votes, okay? So there we go. That's the process. And without further ado, I'm now going to call village case number 20-ZPA-09001. This is for Ray and Pam Murray. It is a variation to increase the maximum ground floor area of an accessory detached garage from 600 feet to 1,200 square feet. And this is section 14.4.3.2. And the location is 470 Mildred Avenue. And over to you, Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. As mentioned, the request is for a variance for a detached garage on the subject property. The petitioner is proposing to build an addition to the back of the existing garage for additional storage, which will be highlighted throughout the presentation here. Brief history on the property. The property is zoned R2 single family. It was originally developed as part of the Jandis Fox River subdivision. The home was constructed back in 1927, and the existing detached garage was permitted back in 1994. The petitioner is seeking a variation this evening to increase the maximum ground floor area for the detached garage, where code permits a maximum of 600 square feet. Petitioner is proposing to increase that up to 1,200 square feet. This slide shows the location of the proposed improvements and the existing improvements that are on the property. As you can see, there is the home situated towards the front of the lot along Mildred Avenue, with the garage set more in the rear yard of the property. The proposed addition would be onto the rear of that structure, which would maintain the existing width of the garage facing Mildred Avenue of 24 feet, but would increase the overall depth of the structure from 26 feet to 50 feet. The proposed structure will comply with all other bulk regulations for setbacks to the side yard of 5 feet, and will exceed the rear yard setback of 5 feet as well. It will be set back at least 12 feet from that property line. This slide shows the proposed elevations for the structure, showing both the south and north elevation and also the west elevation. The rendering, which is shown on the right, would show what the structure will look like when completed, with the proposed addition planning to match the existing architecture and design style for the detached garage. Petitioner is proposing the addition to store some unique vehicles that they own. So the structure will, in addition to the existing garage portions serving vehicles that they utilize throughout daily lives for transportation, the proposed addition, and the petitioner can give more information on the purpose of design for what they're looking for the space, is primarily to store these vehicles that you see in the slide. Staff did research history of accessory structures in the area, similar to a petition that the ZPA reviewed last month. It's within the subdivision that fronts onto the river. There is some unique development patterns in this area, which are for the placement of accessory structures, but also the size of some accessory structures. The petitioner's existing garage was, again, constructed back in 1994. As the ZPA members may be aware, in about 1998, the village adopted new regulations, new zoning ordinance as part of a comprehensive rewrite, and at that point implemented a maximum ground floor area for detached garages. So the existing garage currently at 624 square feet is considered non-conforming in that it was legally built prior to our code requirements, a maximum of 600 square feet. But as you can see by the table, there are several other structures that are in the subdivision which also exceed that square footage. The majority of them were constructed prior to our current codes, with the exception of the property at 405 Mildred, which received a variance for a 816 square foot detached garage back in 2016. So based off this analysis, staff, as you can see, the proposed structure is in keeping with some of the development patterns in the area. The proposed size of the structure will still be larger than some of the other detached accessory garages in the area. The structure, which is at 507 Mildred Avenue, that actually is a permitted structure, as that addition is actually attached to the primary home, so it's not a detached garage, but instead is an attached garage, which would not be subject to the ground floor area requirements, but still is provided for reference as the petition provided information in the packet that provided an image of that garage. As with any variation requests that are submitted before the ZPA and the village board for review, there are various variation standards that need to be met in order to support that variance, which are summarized on the slide. Specifically, the hardship was caused by unique circumstances relating to the land, not the general conditions of the district. The applicant has not taken any action that has caused the extraordinary condition or made it substantially worse than otherwise might have been. The relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality, and also the relief proposed is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations. As petitioner did provide some information in the packet as far as the need for the variance request and how they believe it complies with these standards, is based off the review performed. Staff believes that it is proposed structure will be in keeping with the character or development patterns in the subdivision, and based off the size of the accessory structures on adjacent properties, and the proposed structure will still comply with setback requirements for an accessory detached garage and will not be situated closer to the property line or over size requirements. In addition to information provided in your packet, there was a note that was left on the dais here. The village did receive a letter from one of the petitioner's neighbors that indicated they were in favor of the request. They did not have any objections, and they actually back up the property or are adjacent to the property, and did have no objections to the proposed addition. So that information's on the dais this evening. So in regards to ZPA case 20-09001, should the ZPA determine that the various standards have been met in this case, it is recommended that the ZPA recommend approval of the following motion to the village board, which include approval of a variance to increase the maximum ground floor area for a detached garage from 600 square feet to 1,200 square feet for the property at 470 Mildred Avenue, subject to conditions listed in the staff report. As the variance exceeds the 20% of the code requirement of 600 square feet, this case would be village board final.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, before we move to the petitioner, any questions for Mr. Simmons? So, Mr. Simmons, I do have one. Actually, I have two. And Mr. Mori, I'll probably ask you a similar question. On Exhibit A, I'm noticing, Mr. Simmons, that some of the residents are listed twice, and I'm assuming that's just a error, clerical error?
Let me pull it up. In some cases,
Exhibit
there
A,
are
gentlemen,
multiple
of the
property owners in the area.
I want to use mine.
It's in the back. I'm going back.
So if you start up Ms. Haber, twice, took twice, Haber.
Yeah, so it's those property owners actually own multiple pins in the area. So they would have only had to receive one letter, but they do own multiple properties that are within the area, the vicinity of it.
Yeah, as soon as you
So-
said those names, I realized they have multiple properties, or their property sits on 2 different pins.
Okay,
Correct. Yeah, there's a few, again, the subdivision is somewhat unique. I could go back. So you can see in this area, there's a home that goes across 2 parcels.
yes.
So even though this homeowner owns both those parcels, they would have only need to receive 1 letter. But since it's based off the parcel numbers is how they're listed. And likewise, there's home in this area on Mildred Avenue as well that goes across 2 property lines. So the letter needs to be mailed to each parcel owner of that area, and the owners of those parcels may own multiple parcels within that 250-foot radius.
So thank you for educating me, Mr. Simmons, and then I'll ask the second question, which is, of these property owners, did you receive, I know we received something here in the affirmative, but did you receive any other kind of communication from any of the people noticed?
Not other than the letter that was received on the day of this meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Maury, at this time, if you choose to, you're welcome to add any additional comment or color on the application that you think is appropriate. The only thing we would ask, sir, is that, assuming the microphone's working, if you wouldn't mind speaking from there, and if you would state your name and address. This does get recorded, Mr. Maury, so if
Okay.
people want to review it later.
Name is Raymond Maury. I live at 470 Mildred Avenue in Cary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maury.
I would just like to point out that you've already brought up that the garage doesn't really set a precedent. There was other garages as big as mine proposed or larger. Another thing I'd like to point out is the location of the garage is all the way at the back of the property, so no matter what angle or street you're on, the only way you can see the back of my garage is if you're in my yard. So it's not like it's one up at the street like the other large buildings are. And the term garage, this isn't going to be what you would consider your typical garage. As I gave you those little flyers, they're for storage and just maintenance of 2 of my antique cars, which are 120 and 111 years old,
Very cool.
that cannot really be trusted to be put in storage, so to speak. So this garage will be built for my 2 antique cars, and I can sit and look at them. That's about it.
Well, thank you. Before you adjourn there, Mr. Maury, let me just double check with the gentleman. If anyone on the Zoom application or here in Village Hall has questions for Mr. Maury?
Your intent is not to turn this into a museum and charge admission, right?
I wish. No, this will be anybody that wants to see them. I enjoy sharing them, especially when we go to car shows, cruise nights. That's why I had the little flyers printed up, because people are so curious when they look at it. When the steam car is sitting at the show, I can't just shut it off because it's a steam car. It takes about 20 minutes to fire it up again. So they ask me, well, what does it sound like when it's running? And I go, it's running. It makes no noise. So that's another thing that's nice, so you don't have to worry about me. I'm not building big block Chevelles in my garage. It's just a steam car, and the high wheeler is 12.5 horsepower, so no noise.
And Mr. Maury, I'll ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Simmons. I know that one of your neighbors wrote in the affirmative to support your petition. Did you receive any other feedback from neighbors in the positive or the negative prior to coming here tonight?
Every neighbor around me, I've been in that neighborhood since 1973, and they all say, hope you get it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Maury. So gentlemen, unless we have questions for Mr. Maury, we're going to close that segment of our meeting, and we'll now open it up to the public. For those that are not here with us, with the exception of Mr. Maury, there's no one assembled as citizens here in Village Hall, but I'm double checking with Mr. Simmons to see if there's anybody on the Zoom application.
Nobody online either.
Okay, so with that said, we will close the public portion of that part of the meeting. Gentlemen, before I call the motion, did you have any additional questions that you would like to discuss? Okay,
I want to ask about cars, steam cars later, but that has nothing to do with the garage.
Fair enough. So the chairman will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a variation to increase the maximum ground floor area for detached garage from 600 square feet to 1,200 square feet for the property located at 470 Mildred Avenue, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Yes. Williams?
Yes.
Kretschmer?
Yes.
Graziano?
Yes.
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes. So, Mr. Maury, you have a positive recommendation, and the process now is that you still stay in contact with Mr. Simmons. I believe this theoretically should be put on the consent agenda, but I'll leave it with Mr. Simmons to kind of step you through that process and what you may or may not need to do for the next village board meeting. But Mr. Simmons could probably tell you when that will occur.
The October 20th, as we discussed. So not next week, but the week after, we'll have a schedule for the village board.
I'd like to say that one more thing.
Of course.
That man helped me so much walking me through this. I want to thank him for all the thanks.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Mhm.
He's a good man. He makes the village stronger.
Definitely
And
I do this all the time. For me, this was everything.
I've been on this board for years, and I'd be lost without him, so I know exactly what you're saying.
yeah. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Maury. We'll wish you every success on your project. We'll wish you continued success with your automobile collection. And once you get the garage done, maybe we'll swing by and take a peek at it.
You're more than welcome.
All right. So, yeah, you're welcome, and good evening to you. So, gentlemen, before we adjourn, I just want to double check that what we seem to be having coming down the pike at all.
We may have one case in November. If that submittal comes in, then I'll have a second case that I'll log on that agenda that's village initiated. But I haven't received the petition yet, so it's a pending at this point for November, but I'm anticipating we'll have at least one or two cases in November to review.
All right. Gentlemen that are here assembled in Village Hall, any questions that you want to ask? Gentlemen that are on via Zoom, any questions or comments that you'd like to ask before we adjourn?
No.
Okay, but via general consent, the chair will ask for your approval to adjourn the meeting. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sorry for the confusion when we began. We had something plugged in that shouldn't have been plugged into the computer, so we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you very much.